Just as a reminder that we're going to record. Awesome. So these are just some logistics before we start. I'm going to be demoing some stuff first, so please watch it and then do it hands-on. When we ask you to raise your hands, if you're done with something, please raise your hands. And if you don't want to participate, just please raise your hands so that we don't call on you. And unmute yourself to ask questions or type in the chat, as we said before. And please feel free to interrupt throughout the presentation if you guys have questions. Okay, so what are we going to learn about? The first thing we're going to learn about is how to write a basic WDL. We're going to learn about workflows, inputs, and outputs. We're going to then learn about how to upload this workflow WDL to the Terra workflow repository, and then export the workflow to your own Terra workspace, set it up, run the workflow, and then we're also going to learn about resources supporting WDL workflow development. Okay, so let's start with the WDL workflow basics. So what is a workflow? A workflow is a set of instructions made out of many connected steps. And this is a way to analyze or to process some data. So for example, here you have your input data, you have your processing, this is your workflow, which we write in WDL, which is the language you use to write this workflow. And this stands for Workflow Description Language. This processes the data, produces outputs that you can then analyze using the Jupyter notebooks on Terra, and then the results can then be used for publication. So what we're going to be focusing on today is the set of instructions that we write to analyze and process our data. And to do this, we use WDL. Okay. So I'm going to go to the next slide. So what do we need for a workflow submission? So for each WDL workflow submission, we need a Docker container, which contains the software, and we touched on this yesterday. We need the workflow, which is our set of instructions that we have to process this data. And we're going to write these set of instructions in a language called WDL, which we talked about a little bit before. And then we need Cromwell on Terra to our execution engine to run our WDL. And we also need the data. So we have a workflow and we need a data to work on to process. So what is a Docker container? So we're just going to briefly touch on what we talked about yesterday about finding, creating, and using Dockers, like how you find a Docker image. It could be hosted on your public registry, such as Docker Hub, Quay, or Google Artifact. You can use your Docker image either interactively, as you saw yesterday, or through your WDL workflow. So whenever you have a WDL workflow, you need to specify your Docker. So you need to specify the software that you're going to use to run these sets of instructions. And we're going to touch a lot about this in the next slides. So if you don't understand this, that's okay. But this is what we mean by WDL workflow. We just set it in the runtime section here. And how do you create a Docker image? We saw this yesterday. We build a Docker file, and then you publish the built image to your registry. What we're going to focus on more is your workflow, so how you write it. So what you see here is a task on the left. This is called task A, and then you have your workflow on your right. So your workflow is made out of a set of instructions or set of steps. And these steps in our WDL, in the WDL language, are called tasks. So your workflow is made out of a bunch of tasks. So let's look at how one of the tasks look like. So for example, here to specify a task, you use the reserved keyword task, and then you give it the name you want. And the name is usually descriptive of what the task does. And then you have different sections of this task. So you have your input sections, which it tells your task what the inputs are. So here you can see that task input are reserved keywords. And then when you look at the inputs, you have the files and the strings. So you see file ref, file in, file ID, or string ID, sorry. And file and string here are reserved keywords as well. And then you have your command section. And this command section is where you have your set of instructions of this is a set of steps that you want to use on the input that you have. So you're going to do stuff with your inputs, and you're going to produce an output. And here dash o id.ext, this is the output for this specific command. And then you have your runtime section. And in your runtime section, there are many parameters you can set because I forgot to mention this, but every time you write a task, you provision a virtual machine or a VM. So this virtual machine has your memory, your disk, and many other specs that you can specify in this runtime section. And those it's okay if you don't necessarily specify it because if you don't, it uses the default parameters anyways. But you do have to specify your Docker. So this is your Docker path, and this is basically telling it what software you want to use to process this data. So this is a Docker path. So the Docker here is a reserved keyword, and then you write Docker path here. And you have your final section here, which is your output. And this is the output file that you want your task to produce. So we said before that when you run this command, this is the output file, but we want to tell the task, we want to specifically specify that this task produces this output. So we say file out, where file is your reserved keyword, out is the name you give it, equals the file that you produced as output. So this makes up one task, but as we said before, your workflow is a set of tasks. So for example, here, if you look at on the right, this is workflow, also a reserved keyword, and this is the name you want to give it. And then it takes inputs and then it calls two tasks. So it calls task A, which we talked about here, and then task B, which is not talked about here because this is just a dummy example, but we're going to touch a little bit about the later things in the next slides. But let's look at how this workflow definition looks like. You notice that you have the same section here, which is your input, and it has your files and your strings, but you also notice that the name we give our files are not necessarily in the workflow definition is not necessarily the same as the ones in your task definition, and that's okay. So you have your inputs, and then you have your tasks. So why is it okay that we don't give it the same names? Because when we call our task A, where call is our reserved keyword, and then we have to use input, we tell it basically that the ref in the task definition of A equals to my ref in the workflow definition, and then in the task definition of A equals to my input, and etc. So we're kind of explicitly saying that we're telling it where to look, basically. And then you notice here we said that the output of task A's are file out. And then we explicitly specified this because we want to use the output of task A as input to task B. So we notice here we're calling task B, where the input of this task B equals task A dot out, which is the output of task A. And then here your workflow will first call task A and then call task B. And then use the output of task A as input. Does anyone have questions here? We're going to play around with this a little bit, but if anyone has questions here, because I feel like this is a lot of information, please, you can raise your hand or unmute yourself or text or just write in the chat. Okay. So we're going to touch a little bit on this later, but before we do that, we're going to learn about how you set up your workflow inputs with a JSON file. So this is how your workflow looks like on Terra. And you notice here you have your workflow name and then your source and then your script and your inputs. But you suppose you want to specify the inputs that you have through a JSON file, you can download the JSON file template. And then this tells you, for example, that the different input parameters you have, and you can specify, and then you can upload the JSON file, and that will automatically update the input attributes in your workflow. And where can you find these workflows? You can find them in Dockstore, which is an open source platform for sharing Docker-based tools, or your Terra workflow repository, which is a legacy methods repository where you can browse and search public featured workflows and methods from the Terra community. So how do we write a WDL and run it on Terra? So what we're going to do here is we're going to start the demo. You can work in parallel if you want, or you can watch me and then follow the steps. So we're going to click on this, and what we're going to do first is we want to make a clone of this workspace. So what does a clone mean? A clone means you're going to make a copy of this workspace because we're going to make a copy of this workspace because we have this workspace here, but we don't have permission to create things or to run things. So when you create a clone of it and you give it a unique name, this allows you to run and do things on this in this workspace. So, oh yeah, sorry, let me just go back. To make a clone, there's 3 dots here on the right. We're just going to click on it and then go to clone. And we're going to give it a unique name. So for example, I'm going to give it AA, and then I'm going to give it the date, for example. And then we're going to select a billing project, and this is the first one here, which is the WDL Bootcamp March 2025. And then we're going to click on Clone Workspace. So if you guys want, please start cloning the workspace so we can start working with it. I'm just going to pause here until mine finishes cloning and your workspace is finished cloning as well. Awesome. Is everybody's workspace cloned? You can raise your hands or give a thumbs up or something. Awesome. Okay, so it seems like most of you have your workspace cloned. So after we finish cloning our workspace, we want to work with it. But let's look at this workspace first. We notice that this is a billing. If you look at the URL, you notice that this is your billing project, and this is the unique name you gave your workspace. So this also here is a unique name you gave your workspace. So this is just good to keep in mind to identify the workspace. And then we're gonna go through this step-by-step process where we already did that. We cloned our workspace. And then what we want to do is we want to select the workflows tab, click find a workflow, and then create our own workflow and kind of learn how to do this and export it and all, so on and so forth. Okay. So what I'm going to do here, we notice here that we have in our workspace, we have our dashboard, our data, our analysis part, our workflows, and our submission history. We're going to click on workflows. What we want to do now is we want to create our own workflow. So to do that, we're going to first select find a workflow. And then we're going to select Terra workflow repository. Okay, and then we're going to wait for it for a little bit, and then we're going to create our own new workflow. This is going to be a very simple workflow. It's just going to be echoing your name in a file. So first you want to give it a name. So you can give it a greetings test, and then we can give it here the same name, a greetings text. And here we're going to start writing our WDL. First thing you need to specify is the version of our WDL. So the version we usually use is version 1.0. And then let's specify the different parts of what we want of the workflow. So the first thing we need to specify is what this WDL is going to do. This WDL, as I said before, is just going to echo your name in a file, right? So we're going to specify our workflow. We're going to give it a name. So as you can see, the reserved keywords in WDL will be colored. So here it's colored blue. We're going to call this greetings. For example, workflow greetings. We're going to open brackets, close brackets. And then we're gonna write the different sections that like we saw before. In WDL, we don't use tabs, we use spaces. So usually there's either 2 spaces or 4 spaces. So what we're gonna do is 2 spaces and then write input, open bracket, close bracket. So as you can see, input is a reserved keyword and it's colored blue. And then we're gonna call the task. So we can say greetings task, and this is the name of the task that we're going to create later on. And we're going to open bracket, close bracket. And then we have our output section here, and we're going to open bracket, close bracket. Okay, now we can specify our input first if you'd like. So here, our input at the workflow definition, we said we're echoing a name into a file. So a name is a string. So we can say string name. And then before we start like specifying what the greetings task inputs and outputs are here, let's do it for at the task level. So this is our workflow level. And then we see here that we're calling a task called greetings task. Let's look at how the task looks like. So first we're going to use task, which is our reserved keyword. We're going to use the same name that we have in our workflow for this task, which is greetings task. And we're going to open bracket and then close bracket. And then we're going to specify the different parts of our greetings task. So the first part is our input. Then our command section, which is where we write our set of instructions for the specific task. We can either use greater than or less than signs, or you can use a curly bracket. So you can just open and close brackets as well. And then we're going to have the output section, open and close brackets, and then we're going to have the runtime section where we specify our Docker path. Okay, so in our inputs, this task takes a string and prints it in a file. So we're gonna have an input called name task. So we want to make sure for this specific demo here that we're not giving the same name to our task as a workflow definition, because you can specify then when we're calling the greetings task, the task level to equal the work level variable. And then in our command section here, so what we want it to do is we want it to echo the name. So let's say hello. And then we want to access this variable here. So to access it, we're going to use a tilde and then open bracket, write the name of the variable, and then close bracket. And then we close the quotations here. So hello, the name of the person. And then we want to write this in a file. So let's call this file greetings.txt. So this is the command that we have. Okay. So what's our output here? Our output is a file. We can say output file to equal, you have to open quotations, greetings.txt. All right. And then the last part here is we want to specify the Docker, right? So what is our Docker path? We're just going to use a Ubuntu Docker. So Ubuntu, I think I'm spelling it wrong, latest.
Sorry, everyone. I think we lost a seal there for a second.
Hello, I'm back. Sorry about that. Let me go ahead and share my screen again. Sorry. I think let me just disconnect from.
Are there any questions while Asil is coming back online?
Okay, so we want to specify. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So we want to specify the input. So we have the reserved keyword here, input. We're going to specify the task level definition to equal to our workflow level definition. And we also want to specify the output here, which is out. Let's call it out, for example. It's going to be out greetings, task, sorry, dot output file. And one more thing before we save this. This is supposed to be like this, so not like with the forward slash. That was my bad. It's supposed to be with the columns here. Okay, awesome. So after we do this, we're gonna upload our WDL. And it's okay if you upload it and you get a little bit of errors. Errors are okay. That helps you learn. So I'm just gonna wait until everybody kind of wrote that and tested it out with uploading it. So I'm just gonna share the WDL here so you guys can copy it, copy the different steps. Is everyone done writing this workflow?
Do you want people to raise hands when they're
Yeah,
ready to move on?
that'd be great, actually, yeah. Let's raise hands for this. Did anyone face any errors when they uploaded their WDL? If you did, you can just unmute yourself and ask or talk about it.
As a reminder too, if even if you're not following along with the exercises, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand to let us know that you're ready to move forward as well. That'd be great. Thank you.
No, so there's a question about if you're using a new Docker for the first time, you do need to pull the Docker image first in your task. So your task actually does that for you. So your task pulls your Docker image and then runs it. So in the task, a VM is provisioned and then your Docker is pulled and run within this VM. But you have to make sure that your Docker is public because your WDL can only access public Docker images. Does that make sense? Is there a copy of this file? Yes, there is. The file should be in the link Liz put in at the beginning. So I'm just gonna go back. So there's this link here. Liz, do you mind putting in the link again? Sorry. Oh, there you go. I was trying to copy paste and I thought it didn't work. Oh, it's not in here, actually.
Yeah, sorry, I'm looking for I believe it's in the workspace that was linked in the chat, and I was just trying to confirm that.
Okay, we're gonna provide you with the link to this or the file for this. So if you don't want to follow along as we present, you can just access it later on as well. Okay, so I'm gonna assume that we can move to the next step unless someone objects to it. Okay, awesome. What we're gonna do now, after we wrote this WDL, we want to export to the workspace. To do that, we're gonna click here on export to workspace, and then we're gonna select the workspace that we just cloned. So the workspace that we just cloned is WDL puzzle, right? And then this is my workspace, AA0319. And then this is the name that we're giving it. And then I'm just going to export it. And we're going to go to the exported workspace or workflow. So here, this is our workflow. This is the name. This is the source. And the source here, for example, this is where we wrote the WDL. And these specify the two ways we could define the inputs, either through file paths or a data table. Here, we don't have it, we don't need a data table, so we're just going to click on the file paths. And these here are some runtime options to use call caching, for example, if you want to retry with more memory, if you want to add monitoring to your task. And then here, these are the three sections below where you have your script, your inputs, and this is your workflow level name of your input, which is name. And here I'm just gonna give it my name and make sure you don't forget the quotations. So it's open quotations, your name, then close quotations. And then this is the output section here. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna save the changes that we have, which is the name that we added. And then we're going to click launch. And then when we click launch, it tells you to add a description to the job or to the submission that you just made. So for example, here, I'm going to say print name into file. It's usually good to add a description of what your workflow is doing. And then we're going to click on launch. And this is going to run this workflow that we have. Here is the workflow status. Here it says submitted. Here's a description. And then if you go to your submission history, you can see that it's in blue here and it's saying that our submission is running. So I would like you all to do that as well so that we can learn how to submit a workflow. So I'm just going to pause again here for a little bit until everybody kind of goes through it. And then if you're done with that, please raise your hands. I think some people have their hands already raised from last time, and that's okay as well. But if you don't have your hand raised and you're done, please raise your hand. And if anyone has questions as well, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Oh, could we go back, Asil? It looks like some people are still typing.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Maybe
Okay.
we could.
Okay, let's go back to the WDL then. I was able to get it all typed in it. Yeah, so we can go back to the WDL. So we still haven't uploaded this script in that folder that we sent, but we're gonna upload it. Okay, thanks, Liz. So let's just upload it here. Um, okay, so this is how the script should look like. It's a little different than what we wrote, and that's okay. It still does the same thing. I'm just gonna make it bigger.
Or if you want to see the file version, Asil, we could go back to the whittle that script in Terra that you wrote so that people can
Yeah,
actually.
I'm trying to get like let me see if I can download. Okay, I can actually download it here. Okay. So this is the one we wrote. It's a little different, but it does the same thing. Here it just takes the output, like right here it doesn't explicitly like save it in a file, and it just takes the echoed output from our command and saves it in the file. Here we're explicitly saving the print statement into whatever the print statement prints into the file. So that both work. They both do the same thing. So I'm just gonna pause here for like a minute or two. Can you show again what we put into the script inputs, output, and um, do you mean the script that I'm sharing here, or are you referring to something else? Because you're referring to the launch page as well after we export it. Okay, I can go back again and talk about that. Um, I'm just gonna wait until people have this copied first. So if you have this copied, please raise your hand. If we don't, um, please take your time. That's fine. Okay. Does everyone have it copied? You can also write in the chat because I'm the hands up is a bit confusing. So if you're done like copying it, just write in the chat yes or something. Okay, awesome. All right.
Maybe folks can go ahead and lower their hands while Asil moves on to the showing the next step so that there's no confusion here on who's ready to move on and who's not.
Awesome. Thanks everyone. Okay, so well, I'm gonna do these steps again so that we know like how to export it and stuff. So I'm just gonna go back to our workflows. Okay. So here it says workflow. We clicked on find a workflow. We clicked on Terra workflow repo, and then we clicked on create new workflow. I'm just gonna give it a greetings test, and then copy it, put it here, and then I'm just gonna copy the same thing we had before into our workflow definition here. And then I'm just gonna upload it. And this is so that we can follow the steps as to how to export this workflow into our workspace. So I'm gonna click upload. That's gonna take me to this page here. And then to export this to your workspace, you're gonna click on export to workspace. And then we're gonna select the workspace that we just cloned. That's a good question. What's the difference between collection name and workflow name? So collection name is a name. I think Liz has a better answer to this, so I'm just gonna let her answer that question.
Sure, I'll answer in the chat.
Okay, awesome. And then here I'm just gonna after we export to workspace, we're gonna look for our uh workspace that we just cloned. So the workspace that I just cloned is right here. So I'm gonna click on this and then I'm gonna click export. And then it's gonna take me to the exported workspace here after I click go to exported workspace. So here, this is under the workspace, whittles, puzzles, and then whatever unique name you give it. And this is the workflow that we just created under that workspace. And then here, this is where we kind of define the inputs that we want our workflow to take as inputs. And here, because we're not really specifying any file paths or inputs via file paths or data table, we can just click the first part, which is just define it by file path. And then here we can give it the name or your name, for example, in quotations. And then click save. And then we're gonna launch it. And then when you launch it, you want to give it a unique name. So, or not, sorry, not a unique name. You want to give it a description. So the echoing or printing my name into file. And then we're gonna click launch. And then when we click launch, this takes you to the run. And you can see that the run is submitted. This is the description we give it. This is the submission ID. And then it tells you who submitted it. And you can see that it's cute, and this is like the time, and these are like the inputs and the outputs. And then if you click here, you see here in blue, it means it's still running or getting submitted to the queue and then getting run. And then here in green, you can see that, oh, this finished running. So let's click and see, like for the one that already finished running, it's literally the same thing. Like, so how do we look at the outputs for this run? So first of all, you just click on it, and then after you click on it, you click on these three like lines here that when you like go over, it says job manager, and then I'm just gonna ask you to sign in. And then after you do that, it's just gonna take a while. Just go back, click on it again. Okay, so when you click on it, it should take you to the job manager. Mine just taking a little time to do that. Not sure why. Um, Another way you can look at the outputs is go to your execution directory, which is like the folders thing here. You shouldn't like need to go there, but my job manager isn't loading, so I'm just going to show you that way as well. You're just going to click on call greetings, which is the name of the task. And then here it should show you the name of the output task, which is, if you recall, we called it greetings.txt. And then we can open it, download it, and it just says hello SEO, which is the name I gave it. I don't know why the job manager isn't working though, but I'm going to click on it again to if you guys can do the same steps and if the job manager works, then you can just go to the output section of your job manager and that should give you the path to your output file. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, did everyone run their workflow? If you finished launching the workflow, please raise your hand up. Yes, thank you. Awesome. Okay. Is anyone still trying to launch um the workflow to run it? If you are, can you just write in the chat that you're still working on it? Okay. So it seems like everybody's done running it. We can revisit this again. I'm gonna see if I could access the job manager somehow in a better way. Um, okay, so but you should access it through the execution directory, so that should be fine. Okay, so what we did so far is okay, so if you guys can put your hands down now, that'd be great. Awesome, thank you. Okay. So what we did so far is write like a little hello world kind of WDL and run it on Terra. we kind of define like how the workflow looks like, and we had just one task to do that. But now let's try doing this on a real example. So if you have like a BAM file, for example. So the same example that you did yesterday, just with the Docker, we're gonna do now using Terra and WDL and Terra. Um, so here, what we're going to do is you're going to have a BAM, which is your aligned sequencing reads. And then you're going to use SAM tools to index this BAM, and then use SAM tools to generate quality metrics. And then you want to save the output of this into a text file. So just as a review, this is what we did yesterday. We prepared your Docker Hub repo. We downloaded, build, and pushed your Docker image. And these are just like the steps of how you did it. And we also learned how to mount files to your container and then run certain commands there. And this is the same commands that we're going to run in your WDL. Again, when you write a task and you have your Docker path there, this will pull and run your Docker image the same way it was doing here, but it'll do it in the WDL without you explicitly defining it. So how do we create the SAM tools QC WDL? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to download this template here. So we're just going to click on it. Download. And if you look at it here, this is, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. This is a template for now analyzing your BAM tools file. And it kind of divides it into like your workflow section here, gives it a name, descriptive name of what this workflow does. And then it also specifies your input BAM and your input section of the workflow. And then it has your task level right here, or your task level definition, where you have your input, your command, your output, and then your runtime section as well. So the idea here is for you to fill this out with using what you learned with your Hello World example, and also with the example before that we kind of walked through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this little template in a text editor, and I'm going to start building this workflow. But before I do that, I kind of want you to do it yourself. So the same way that we did before, so like I'm just going to copy this, for example, go to our workflows, find a workflow, and then Terra workflow repo, and then create new workflow. And I'm just going to put it here. You can say here, AA SAM tools metrics, and then everything here. And I'm going to pause here for a little bit because I kind of want you to do this yourself and try it before we start doing it together. So I'm just going to pause for like a minute. Just as a reminder, the Docker image that we created yesterday, or you were using yesterday, or you built from the Docker file that you had, has SAM tools in it. So your Docker path should be that image that has the SAM tools in it. So, okay, let's walk through it. All right, so we see here that the same way we did it before, where you have your version, you have to specify your version. You have your workflow definition here, where you write workflow, which is your reserved keyword, give it the name that you want it to, and then you have your input section, the section where you call the task, and then your output section. And then you have your task level definition, where you have your input section, your command section, your output section, and then your runtime section. So let's start with the task level because we want the workflow to call this task. So let's specify what this task that we want your workflow to call is. So let's call this task analyze BAM, for example. And your file it's going to take a BAM file as input, because if you go back here, it takes your BAM file as input, does these things to your BAM file, and then outputs this as an output to your task. So we kind of want to specify it here. So it takes your BAM file as input, so we can call it BAM. And in your command section here, you notice that we're using the greater and less than sign, and that's fine as well before we're using the curly brackets. Because we're assuming that our Docker will have SAM tools in it, we can call SAM tools, and we want to index the spam. And then to access the variable that we have, we're gonna use tilde, open bracket, the name of the variable, and then close bracket. So this is the first part where we're indexing our BAM. Then the second part we had was we want to use SAM tools to generate the quality metrics. So they're going to use SAM tools, IDX stats, and then tilde, open bracket, BAM, close bracket. And we want to save this into the output of this command into a file. So we're going to call this file metrics.txt. Does this make sense so far? You can type yes or no in the chat. Okay, awesome. Okay, so after we specify our input and our command, we want to specify the output. So the output here is a file. We're going to call it output file, and it's going to take the metrics.txt as your output. So what here, the metrics.txt is where we save the quality metrics of the SAM tools command, and we're going to output it here as an output of the task by saving it into output file here and specifying the metrics.txt. Then the final thing we need to do is specify our Docker. So if you go back here, there was some review parts in the previous slides that kind of touched a little bit on what we did yesterday, which is we downloaded the Docker file, then we built the Docker, and then we pushed it into the public repo. So this is a Docker, this is the image I created, and this is in my public repo. So you guys can use the ones you created yesterday. So it would be your last name or your first name / the name of the Docker. And then what you need to do is just plug it in here. Oh, sorry, the copy paste did not work as anticipated. All right, we're gonna put it here. And then we're gonna go back to our workflow definition. So in the workflow definition, it says call something. So we're going to call the task that we just wrote. So we're going to call analyze BAM. And then we want to specify the inputs, what we want to like set the input parameters of this task. So the first and only input is BAM, and then we're going to equal that to input BAM, which is our workflow name of the parameter. And then the output of this workflow, so when you specify the output of the workflow, it allows you to access the outputs of the workflow rather than accessing only the outputs of the task. So when you usually run a workflow with multiple tasks, each task creates an output. But if you want your whole workflow to have these certain outputs as outputs, you need to specify in the output section of your workflow definition. So we're just going to call it output file out equals analyze BAM dot, and we're going to go back and remember what we named it before, which is output file dot output file. And then we're going to click upload. So I'm just going to wait a little bit until everybody kind of filled this out. If you're done, please raise your hand. Okay, awesome. Okay. All right, so now it seems like most of you are done. Yes, sorry, Abby. Here. Is that good? You can go ahead and lower your hand, please. Thanks. I guess I'll ask people who aren't done to raise their hands. I think that's better. All right. Do you have a copy of the text somewhere? I'm getting so it's okay if you get an error. Liz just linked the Google Drive for that. But it's okay if you get an error. So I might get an error as well. So let's see. If we click upload, will this give me an error? No, it didn't. Okay. But let's look at like what's the error you're getting?
I'm just getting an error that I have I must have typed something wrong, so I would just wanted to look at the.
Okay, I can download this again and then open it here. So the error usually it's not like super descriptive, but it tells you like what line it's on, like the error is on. Is this helpful, Abby?
Yeah, I'm just gonna copy and paste in the.
Okay, sounds good. I'll wait then for a few minutes. I get this code. Oh, okay. You're getting an authorization error. And I think it's because you're using the same name I'm using as your collection name. So for your collection name, and that's my bad. Okay, so let's go back here. I'm just gonna go back here, here. So here, when I go here and click on find, create a workflow, there's a collection name and then there's a workflow name. So your workflow name could be whatever you want, but your collection name should be unique to you. So if you use the same collection name I have, that could give you an error. So if you just write like TS, whatever your initials instead, that should work. Okay, I think I lost the workflow. I'm just gonna go back. I think this is fine. Yeah, okay. Abby, are you still getting an error?
No, I pasted in the one. I'm just wondering how can I edit it now that I've imported it in if I want to make a change to
Uh,
add my Docker Hub thing.
so what are you getting an error on? Like
I'm
I,
not getting an error. I because I copied and pasted your version of it.
okay,
But
you'd like to edit it?
yeah, how do I go back and edit it now that I've done that next step?
So what you can do is you can click here on edit. There's like the three dots and then click edit and that should allow you to edit it. But to get here, like from like Terra, I'm just gonna go to the, all right, I'm gonna go to my workspace. So usually here, I'm just gonna show you like the other example that we did. This is like the workflow. If you click on the source, that will take you to this page. And if you click on the three dots and then edit, that allows you to edit it. And then to access it, you just need to go to the, so like I'll just let me export this first and then I can show you how to do that. So like I'm gonna export this to my workspace. It's called Whittle Puzzles, and that's the name, the unique name I gave it. I'm going to export it, and this is going to take me to the exported workflow. And then here, if I wanted to edit the specific workflow, I click on the source, and then I go here and I edit it. And for example, let me just put like a comment here. So run SAM tools, for example, and then I'm gonna create new version. If you go back to your workflow, you can just select that version that you just created. So this is like the version 2. And if you go to your script here, it shows you that you wrote this run SAM tools comment. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Is anyone else experiencing errors when they're running this? Okay, so I'm gonna assume silence means that um, no one's experiencing errors. If you are, you can just like paste it in the chat as well and you can go over it. Okay. No, you don't need to. So what you need to do is you just go to your workflow and then for your snapshot, it's just going to show you the second snapshot. You don't need to export it again. But I'm getting an error. Finish parsing. Okay. Can you show me the whittle? Maybe you can copy it into the chat or something. This seems like a syntax error. Um,
Yeah, and it's at the command section. So I wonder if pasted it. Yeah.
okay.
Um,
Okay, so the error is because of the name. You're specifying the task level input name to be input BAM, but in your command section, you're not like specifying the same name. You're not using the same variable name. So you're using tilde BAM, then tilde BAM. It should be either you change in your input, you change the name to file BAM, or you change in your command section file index input BAM. And then also like if you go back to your workflow definition, that's also going to give you an error because in your input section of the workflow definition, you're setting BAM to equal input BAM, but the BAM should be the first part on the left. That's your task level definition, like file name that you're giving it. So if you're setting your file level name to input BAM, in your workflow space where you're saying BAM equals input BAM, it should be input BAM equals input BAM because your task level is input BAM and your workflow level is input BAM. So you have to make sure you're using the same names throughout. Because you want to make sure that it's like it's looking at what you're calling exactly. And I see another error with the SAM tools. It's IDX stats, not in X stats. So that will give you an error, not like when you're uploading the whittle. This will give you an error when you're submitting it. So when you submit it, it's gonna give you like a red, like this job failed because you're using a command in SAM tool that doesn't exist. All right, does anyone else have an issue?
Sorry, I see. I think there's one more on the task analyze BAM. It looks like there's a bracket, extra bracket before the command section, possibly.
That is correct. That bracket should be after your runtime section. Fail to process, can't generate outputs for. Do you mind copying and pasting your code as well? All right, so it says no such callable exists in analyze BAM. So it's complaining about, it seems like it's complaining about the outputs, but I might be mistaken. So first of all, just looking at this, it seems like you didn't really use spaces to do your input in your file. So I would suggest using either 2 or 4 spaces when you're like writing your input section or writing your files and stuff. That also helps with like readability. Um, okay, so the first issue I'm seeing is that the name you're giving your task in the workflow level definition is not the same name you're giving your task. So it's one is capitalized BAM and the other one isn't. So I suggest like changing maybe the workflow level because it seems like you have it as lowercase in other places. And I think that's what it's complaining about. Yes, I can show you how to edit your whittle. Just give me one. So you guys can see my screen here, right?
Yes.
Awesome. So we're just going to click on here. So here it says source, and then it says the name that we just gave our workflow. So we're just going to click on it. And then here, there's 3 dots on the right. So we're just going to click on those 3 dots and click on edit. And this is going to allow us to edit this. So to edit it, I'm just going to remove the comment I just wrote, for example. And then I'm going to create new version. But you don't need to export again. What you need to do is we're gonna go back to our workflow. We're gonna refresh it, and then we're gonna look. If you look here, there's a snapshot section, and then you can see here there's numbers, and this is your latest snapshot of the code you just wrote, and this is how you look at it. Does that make sense? Awesome. Is anyone else facing errors? Okay, and it's okay if you face errors, like that's part of writing code. So if you face errors throughout, and I pass this part, please let us know and we'll take a look at it. Okay, so this is our workflow that we just wrote. If you go here, this is the snapshot that we just talked about. And then here, this is the source that we just also talked about. And then here, it says we're going to either run the workflow with inputs defined by file paths or inputs defined by a data table. And we know that for this workflow, we need a BAM file. So we need to access it somehow. So in the workspace we cloned, there is a BAM file in the workspace that we cloned. So it's under data. So if you go to the data section here, and you click on BAM, it's going to give you the 2 different BAMs that you have. So you have your medium-sized BAM and you have your small-sized BAM. So we want to access these BAMs to run our workflow. So we're going to go back to our workflow. We're going to go to the SAM tools metrics workflow we created, and then we're going to click on run workflows with inputs defined by the data table. And we can do that because we just saw that the BAM files are there in our data table. It's specifically under BAM. So if you click that, if you select that and then you click select, so if you click the BAM file and then you select data, you click the BAM that you want. So we're going to click the smaller BAM. And then we're going to press OK. And this selects the BAM that we want to run as an input to our workflow. And then we need to specify it in our table here below. So this is our input table. And this shows us the task name that uses this input. And then this is the variable name that we set, and this is the type that we have. So the input value here could be specified by saying this dot file path. So this specifically says it's this table, and then the file path is the column that we want it to look at. So if I go back to select table, this is our BAM ID and this is our file path. We want to tell it to look at the file path specifically because it takes the file as input. So we're going to say this dot file path, and then we're going to save it. And then we can also set our output file to be a column in our table. So this is the input part. And then here we can say this dot out. And then this will create a new column in the table and save the output, which is the metrics file, as a column in that table. And we're just going to save it. And then we can just click launch. And then here we're going to write our description. So our description is to analyze or index spam and generate quality metrics. And then we're just going to click launch. And this is just going to take us to our job that we just run. And if you go to submission history, this is shows you the file that we used as input and our index spam quality metrics. This is a comment. And then it shows us that it's about to start running. Okay, so let's do that together. So let's go to our workflow and do what I just did, and let's launch a workflow with the small BAM as an input. Okay, so is anyone facing errors yet? Is it working? Let us know. If you have any questions as to how to define your inputs from the data table, please also let us know. All right, how do you find the output files? So if you go to outputs here, is this what you mean, or are you talking about after it runs how you find it? So to set it, you go here, you set your input first, and then you select the data table, you select the table, you select the BAM that you want to run it on, you put your inputs and outputs as we saw before. But after it runs, if you go to your data table, it should create a new column here that says whatever the name you gave it. I think I gave it out as the name. And then the out should it should be a new column here with the metrics.txt we have for the file for the BAM file that we just ran the SAM tools on. Does that make sense? Or is that your question? I might have misunderstood it. Awesome. So now it's running here. You can see that with the new status. So I'll go back here. Are you all able to run it? If I selected multiple BAMs, do I get one report file per BAM? Yes, you get one report file per BAM. Is there a way to merge the report files into one large table so I can view the report on all samples at once? I think you need to, so there's something in WDL that's called scatter. So you can scatter. I think you need to specify explicitly in the WDL to do that. Yes, I think you need to write a new task to do that. I wouldn't say to write a new workflow. I would just probably scatter it in your WDL. Scatter means you're running multiple things in parallel. And then after it finishes running, you could just have take that into a new task and report on the samples at once. All right. I'm assuming the people who have their hands up are done with it. Is that correct? I'm gonna assume the silence means yes. Okay, there's another question that says, can I put the full path like GS um slash for the output value? I'm not sure of that actually. I haven't done it before. Maybe Liz could help with that.
You no, it will write to the workspace bucket. I do believe you can specify a folder within your bucket, but you can't like change the bucket that it's writing to on this output tab here.
Yeah. And maybe if I kind of go back to submission history and show you why that's the case, because if I go to the execution directory here, this is the bucket that it's writing into. So if I go to call greetings, the greetings.txt is in this bucket. So that's why it might be a little hard to do that.
And then Abby has a question, and I'm going to ask Abby, when you set up your inputs, did you put this dot what was it, file paths as the
No, I did it with the data table.
yeah. So Asil, can you go back and show that setup? And the reason I'm asking this is because sometimes when the inputs are not set up correctly to use the data table, you get that error, or we might actually have a permissions error, which we can also show you a way to kind of check that. So if you go back to your workflow, oh, sorry. Yeah, if you go back to your workflow and just make sure that you have that BAM data table selected in step one. So step one is that BAM data table. And then you selected BAM 2.
Yep, that's what I did.
And then this dot file path.
That's what I did.
File underscore path, just making sure that that is, and you save.
Yep.
Okay. So then another option is possibly that maybe these files are not open access anymore, but we would expect more people to get this error. But if you go to the data table and you go to your BAMs, when you click on it, can you see any information about any file details the way that a seal can here?
I can.
You can.
Yeah.
Okay. So that still indicates then possibly a setup problem.
So I think I also have
Oh,
let me look. Okay, so getting an error is fine. So we're gonna go back to our submission history. So I think we're getting the same error then, if there is a permission issue. So if the red here says, oh, you have an error. So we want to take a look at this error. So we're gonna look at the job manager. Hopefully this opens this time.
yeah.
It's not opening. I'll have to look at the logs then, like if I go to the execution directory and then the log. So I think it's complaining about the file. Is it? No,
The
it's the
Docker. Is it the Docker?
no, it says no such file or directory. Um,
Can you run this? Can you run the Docker that you like? Can we look at the Docker in the script?
yes, let's do that. Let me change the Docker path. My Docker there might be issues in the Docker I have. Liz, can you send me the Docker you used yesterday, or
Yeah, let's
it should be public, so I should be able to pull it. Okay. All right. So it's giving me an error, and that's okay. So we were trying to figure out what this error is. Usually, the job manager, so if I go back here, like if you click on the submission history and then you click on the job manager part, this should open usually. I don't know if it's opening for the rest of you, but for me, it's not opening for some reason. And I don't know why that's the case. Oh, there you go. All right, so here you see that it's giving us an error saying that the job stopped while running the script and it exited here. So this could be an issue with the Docker path. And you see here that it ran for 5 minutes. So localize our files, so our files are fine. So we have access. I have access to that, it seems. Seems like others don't, which is something we need to address. But then there's something here that says there's an error, probably with the Docker path that I have. So I'm gonna go back to my WDL. And remember the latest one we have is snapshot 3. I'm gonna click on this and then click on edit. So I'm gonna use a different Docker path. And this is hopefully a Docker path that's gonna work. And mine's just maybe like I made this Docker a while ago, so that might be the issue for me. But for you all, you made this yesterday, so I think it should be fine for your end. Unless you're getting the same error. Okay. I'm gonna ask people to lower their hands until we kind of figure out these error messages so that if someone has an error, they can put their hand up, which might be easier. Liz, did you find the path?
Oh, yes, sorry. I didn't know if you grabbed it. There it is in the chat. eKiernan slash
Okay.
Docker 1v1. Um,
So I'm just gonna, so I just changed the Docker path. I'm just gonna click.
Seal, I don't think single versus double quotes should make any difference, but we typically specify with double quotes
Oh,
just to.
oh,
that
what?
might,
Yeah. In the example that I linked to, it is single quotes, so that, if this is a problem, then just note that that example would also be problematic.
yeah. Okay, so we're just gonna go back to our workflow. We're gonna select the latest snapshot version. Everything's already set for us, so we're just gonna save it. Our output is set, our input is set, and we're just gonna, oh, so it's gonna ask you to select the data again. So we're gonna select the second BAM, and then we're just gonna launch. So we can rerun again with Docker path. And then we're gonna launch this. Martha, do you have a question, or is your hand up because you're done? So let's take the time while it's running to go through other errors people are facing. So what other errors are you facing? The run should not take a long time because the file is pretty small. So localizing the file probably take a minute, for example, and then running it should SAMTools index and the IDX stats should take maybe like a few minutes. So I don't think it's going to take long. So mine failed in 5 minutes, and 5 minutes, it took 5 minutes to localize and start running. So I would assume like 10 minutes maybe. So let's look at the different errors people are getting. There is a permission error I think Abby's getting. Is that correct to say, Liz? Maybe we could give her access to it.
Abby, can you rerun with the same, or can we do we know that error, did you do the same thing that Asil did and go into the log file? I want to know if they actually were the same error.
I got that out of the log file.
You got that out of the log file. Okay. But you said you can see the file details when you click on the BAMs.
Yeah,
Um, okay. Would you be comfortable? I could also jump into a breakout room with you if you're comfortable sharing screen. And when we come back, we could report to the group. Um, you do that?
sure.
Would that work? Okay. I'll make a breakout room and we'll go in there. Um, okay. Great. All right. The room is opened, and so you should be able to hop in. Oh, does it say 26 rooms? No, unassigned 20. Okay. Me.
It may, um, are you saying that the log, if you're opening it in two different ways, you get different things? Is that the comment, Terrence?
Yeah, so I got the same error as Abby whenever I just clicked on um, analyze bam.log, and then from there I clicked on the public URL link. I get that anonymous caller does not have storage.objects.get. But when I download it, then I see everything that I think you were showing, starting delocalization, et cetera, et cetera.
So when you say the URL link, so if I'm this is the job that failed, I click on the job manager.
Yeah, so it was actually over on like Google Cloud. So to the
Execution directory.
yeah, and then so there was you could either click on that and then download it and view it, or public URL. Yeah, so
Okay, so
s-
all right, so she's using the public URL and then
maybe Abby can comment on how she got this there. Yeah, so that's what I get to when I do it that way.
yeah, that makes sense. That's a good point. Is that I think Abby's in the breakout room now, but we can definitely ask her about that. So someone's saying BAM 1 succeeded, but BAM 2 failed, and BAM 2 I counted the error. Um okay, so there's no space left on the device. So that means that the file's too big, although BAM2 is smaller. So like I'm a bit confused as to why that's the case. But it says before that there's no such file or directory. So, and that's the same error I got. So I'm assuming, so let me try rerunning it on BAM2. So it seems like there's access issues with BAM1. So I'm just gonna go and run it on BAM2 and see. So I'm gonna select, sorry, you said BAM 160. So I'm gonna select BAM 1 and then rerun this, run on BAM 1. So there may be issues with accessing in BAM 2. Sorry, BAM 2 succeeded. BAM 1 failed. Okay, no way. Wait. Wait. Okay, so BAM. Yes. So BAM 1 failed because it's bigger, probably. And that's what the no space left on device may mean. It's bigger, so you don't have enough space on your VM to index and generate the quality metrics for this file. Um, so that may be the case. Is that what you're copying out here? Is this the output of your log? Um, I don't know. I don't want to mispronounce your name, Soyeon, but is this the output of your log that you copied here? Yes. Okay. So that might be the case. What you can usually, if you face this kind of error, when you're developing a whittle or whatever, in the runtime section, we didn't really touch on this before, but you can like increase the size of your VM and give it like more disk space, or more memory. So that may work. I can show you a little bit about how that's done in a bit, but let's look at Chris's error. He says, I got the following error. Task samples metrics failed. This, well, um, okay. Yeah, Chris, do you mind sharing your code? Okay, awesome. And Chris, is this the error you got when you ran on the first BAM or the second BAM? So the smaller one or the bigger one? I ran on both so far. The second one failed. Okay, so that's the smaller one. So let's take a look at the file. This is the code. Okay, so looks fine so far. It's taking input. Okay, so far so good. Unless sorry, what?
We are trying, I think the double quotes in the Docker, if it is a Docker error, if we're seeing evidence that it's a Docker error, I see that this one has single quotes, so it might be worth trying double quotes.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. Let's try the double quotes for that one then. Okay, these are still running to kind of like try to track it. Okay, so it's running more than the 5 minutes, so I think it's actually, yeah, so this is done. So it is the double and single quotes for the Docker path. That was my bad. So you need to use double quotes when you're specifying your Docker path, not single quotes. Is anyone else getting an error? And Chris, can you report back to tell us like if using double quotations worked instead of the single quotations?
Yeah, I'm going to try the double quotes now to see how that works.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks. Is anyone else facing an error? Okay. Um, I know there was someone who tried testing it out on the bigger file, and I think they got like out of no space on file or on device left when they were using that file, I think is BAM1. Um, I can kind of show you a whittle we have, kind of like show you how you can specify the memory and all that kind of stuff in your whittle, if that's helpful. Okay, let me just go back here. So this is the whittle we have. We just specify the Docker path, but usually if I go to, I'm just going to show you an example of a whittle we have where we kind of specify like the different like runtime parameters. So for example, here, if we go down here, this is like a task. We don't really need to understand what it's doing, but here in your runtime, you have other different parameters as well. So you have your memory, you have your disk, and you have your CPU. And there's some Whittle documentation that kind of touches on this as well. So I would suggest like kind of reading that a little bit before trying this out. And this controls like the VM that you're going to provision. So maybe if you increase the disk space, I'm not really sure what the default disk space is for a task that we just provisioned with the default parameters. But I'm assuming it's like a standard machine that's not like super powerful. So maybe that's why it's failing.
It's pretty small. So
Yeah, so this is thanks, Jess. Liz, sorry. This is a default machine. Is this it? The default like
no, that's just an example, but Cromwell documentation has the default values in there, and this shows all like the different kinds of, so they're like right there, you can see the attribute descriptions: default 1 CPU, memory default 2G.
yeah, so this is really small.
I believe the disk default is 10G as well.
Yeah, and if the file is bigger, then it's gonna fail. So let's look at the file actually. The file size is 18 gigabytes. So yeah, it's gonna fail if it's just 10. So maybe increase the disk space to like, let's say 30, 40. Okay. Was everyone able to run their workflow successfully? So mine also failed because I use the default parameters for it. So this is the second BAM, which is bigger. And it's also failing because of that. I can go in and show you all how to do it if you'd like, in terms of how to set the um, memory. So if we go back here, like memory disk, just gonna copy that. So we're gonna go back here. There's memory disk. So we're just gonna specify this as, let's say 40, let's say 10. I saw the first line, Docker. What does this mean? Okay, so yes, let's just explain that. It's a variable that we set, and that's why we just set that. And then for the disk part here, like these are just different variables that we have, and we kind of set it in the beginning. So that's why we're able to do that. So for the disk, like you can just say like 30 GI. So if you go to documentation, it kind of tells you how to specify it. Oh, I don't need to write the GI part. Okay, my bad. So it kind of looks like something like this. So you set your memory and your disk. So I would suggest like playing around with this and trying to run it. And if it fails, that's fine. Just go through the documentation, go through the error and see like why it's failing. Okay, so I'm gonna assume that we're all done running it on the smaller BAM file. Is that correct to assume? Can we all put our hands up if you've done that already and it successfully ran? Awesome. Okay, so please put your hands down. And so this is stuff we've done before. And these are just like next steps for you to try out if you want to. So you can set up Cromwell and WOM tools locally. And through just in like these, you can look at the 5-minute introduction and click on this link here. WOM tool kind of like checks the syntax of your Whittle, and then the Cromwell runs it for you. And it also outputs like a JSON file. For next steps, these are just like a little bit of tips that we have when you're running a Whittle or writing a workflow or thinking about writing one. So first of all, errors are okay, as we've seen throughout this workshop. That's okay. Like usually like there's access errors, or for example, the one quotation versus the double quotation error, or you can have like out of disk, there's no disk space left on your machine because you're using a bigger file. So these are all errors that we usually get when we're writing this WDLs. So that's totally fine. I would just suggest like looking at the error message that you got, reading through your log, making sure from your documentation and from like other WDL examples that that like you've done the right things, and that there's not like a mistake somewhere. If so, we did touch on scatter a little bit when someone was asking about like if you want to run it on like all your BAMs, like how do you merge the outputs of it together. If you do have a scatter, and the scatter is basically you have like the same task and you're running it on like multiple files at the same time. We would suggest to test it out on just one file, so one scatter, like a scatter of one first, and then test it out with a scatter like a small number of files first. So for example, test it out on like the one file and then test it on like 3, 4, and then maybe like 10, and then do it on all your files at the same time. We also touched on this a little bit as well. When you're writing a WDL, the tasks, each task in your WDL, it provisions a virtual machine. So beware of cost. So if you have like multiple tasks, each task will provision a virtual machine. And for each virtual machine, you can set the different specs of that machine through the parameters I was showing you before, such as like the disk, the memory, the number of CPUs, etc. So obviously, the bigger the machine, the more expensive it is. And sometimes you don't need a big machine. So like just making sure that you're using the machine that is required for your task. And also, we also talked about this before, that you can have a Docker for a single software, but you can also have a Docker that contains multiple softwares. And that is sometimes important when you're writing a task. So you don't need to have, if you have like you have like a file that you want to do different things to, instead of having a Docker for each of the different steps that you have that uses a different software for each of these different steps. And that means for each of the steps, you're going to provision a task, which might be expensive. What you can do is you can have a Docker that like combines all these softwares that you're using to analyze this data, and then have one task to do that in. And just to touch on this yesterday in terms of like you have to like see like if it's super expensive to localize and delocalize. And by localizing, I mean you have a VM and you want to upload the data into your VM. So the bigger the files, the more time it's going to take to upload it, and the more time it's going to take to extract the data from that VM. So you have to like look at those different things. Catch errors and adjust, such as tools that rely on file system or directory searches will break in the cloud, and begin optimizing computing resources for each task. I think that's self-explanatory. These are some little resources that you guys can use to understand more about WDL. And this is about cloud cost. So also more resources on cloud cost. And then I don't know if there's time. I think there's 15 minutes. But we want to learn about what you do. So if there is a common analysis step that you do, we want to learn about it. So like if you don't mind unmuting yourself, telling us about the data, the process, and the software, or if you have a WDL or another workflow, doesn't have to be specifically in WDL language that you've written and want to run in Terra. If you want to talk about it, we're more than happy to listen and to learn about that.
So there is a question too, Asil, in the chat that might be worth kind of spending a few minutes describing how to modify the WDL script if we want to use files/runtimes in our Docker container.
So is your question that you have a Docker container that has files in it already and you want to use that in your WDL script? Okay, so you need to modify those. So when you're creating your Docker image, there's like a specific way to create it with those files. So if suppose you have that Docker already with those files, you could modify it in your command section. So you'd have to access the files through the command section and then modify it.
Should we go back to the example that we did because we did this as an exercise where everyone built a Docker container that had SAM tools in it, and then we used SAM tools to actually do something. If we had a custom script, wherever we loaded that custom script in the Docker, we could call that path from the command line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the command section here, suppose like our Docker path here has another file that we have in our Docker. We can modify it from the command section. Either like you can if there's Python in your Docker, you can use Python, you can use Bash. Yeah, am I misunderstanding the question? Okay, awesome.
Yeah. Another thing we could show. So when you make this is going back to yesterday's concepts, but when you make your Docker file, you have the option to copy scripts in from wherever you need to into your Docker image. But that might have a file path attached to it. So you might copy scripts from a location on your local where you're building your Docker file to a specific folder in your image, just like we kind of mounted to a specific folder in the image yesterday. So let's say you copied a bunch of scripts from your local computer into a folder in your Docker image called scripts. Then if you wanted to call a script in there, example.py, you could do it from this command line. So if you wouldn't mind, like just to like show an example, you would just use the absolute path right there, like under that command section to scripts/example.py.
Yeah, but I mean, it depends on, so for example, like so to get the path, you can do pwd to get the path, like the root directory, and that's usually like Cromwell root. That's your path, like the root directory, the default place that you're going to be in when you start provisioning your VM. Now for like the script part, it depends where it is. Like it could be in your Conroe root, but it could be like Liz was saying, like in another directory. Suppose like we have it saved under like a directory called scripts. And this is just an example, like scripts tests.py or whatever in your Cromwell root. So you would have to like access like this test.py through like through this. So you have to like go to your Cromwell root through test.py. It's all about like where you are and where you saved your file, right? And then depends on like what software you have in your Docker. You can either use like Python to like modify it, or you can, if you know like the line number of your bash or whatever, you can also modify it there. I think there is an example we have where we kind of do that. I'm just gonna go back and see if it's there. But I don't want to like confuse people as well.
Yeah, I would say generally if we're baking files into Dockers, those are going to be files that you run as is. And if you're modifying files, those are going to be files that you're passing in as input.
Yeah, yeah.
That would generally be how I'd think about it. So like scripts you might bake into your Docker because they're just going to run the same way every time. But if you're wanting to make changes to files, it's much more efficient to pass them in as input files.
Exactly.
And then make the changes you need to make and pass them back out as output files.
I agree with that. I mean, like sometimes you get this Docker image that someone already created and you need to like modify certain things. So you do that because you need to modify the scripts in the Docker because of that. But otherwise, like I wouldn't use that as like a general practice in terms of like
Yeah, that's a good point. Something to keep in mind if that is the case and you always need to modify it the same way though, is that when you run it in your whittle task command, every time you run that, it will do that step. So especially if it's a like intensive step, you might want to consider rebuilding the Docker, right? So what you would do is you would use the Docker that somebody else provided you as the base image, and then in your Docker build, in your Docker file, you would make whatever changes need to be made there, and then save a new image, so that you wouldn't have to do that change, whatever change you need to make every single time you run your workflow, but rather just do it once and save the image.
Yeah, yeah. Can we leave the input section of the task blank if our input file is in? Okay, I think just answer that. Like, I would not use this as best practice. I would use the input section to have your input file and not put input files in your Docker. Use your Docker just for the software, and then for the files that you want to run it, and use that like as separate. I would not combine the two, because like you need to think about reproducibility as well, and you want to make sure your Docker isn't too big. So if you put your files in your Docker container, that's going to make it too big, and that's going to make it forever to pull it and run it. So I would just have your Docker container just to keep your software there, and then for the input, I would just like input it into the task. Does anyone else have questions about this, or like is anyone facing errors or wants us to look at something they're doing?
Yes, I have a quick question. It's about the command section. So I've read different Riddle version, I think 1 point something or 2, where sometimes they're using this bracket instead of the three little arrows there. Is there a recommended best practice of which one to use and which one is like, I don't know, the latest version that people are using?
Um, I would say like from my knowledge, you can alternate between the both, like the two. Like it's not
'Cause
um
Sorry, is
some
that's for the these symbols that are highlighted here versus the
y-
curly brackets?
yes, exactly. Because I've had
Yes.
issues where when you use that quote instead of the little arrows, then when you try to upload to Whittle, it doesn't recognize it, and you have to change it. And or the Python, when you're passing Python, like brackets and things like that, it doesn't recognize it. So you have to go back to all the arrows and then make sure the parameters are inside the brackets. So I just don't see what's a consensus. I've seen different Whittles with different command format.
Yeah. So one note of caution here is if you're using the curly braces like are being shown right here, um, it, there's certain things that don't behave nicely. Like bash does not behave nicely. So bash arrays, you cannot specify a bash array like this. You have to use the arrows in order to specify a bash array. So if you want to like loop over something, you have to use the arrows. So my recommendation is to always use the arrows or chevrons or greater than less than symbols, whatever you want to call them. I would recommend using those rather than the curly braces, just because I think it's a little cleaner and allows you to do more. But I'm not sure if
Okay.
there's an official Whittle recommendation or not.
Yeah,
I
yeah, I don't have the document in front of me right now, but I think there were things where they are saying, for example, when they say use four spaces instead of using a tab, would you use this versus that? And then there was in one of those they say use the curly bracket instead of the less than equal signs. But it causes issue that less than equal that curly bracket in the comment. I think we always end up
Yeah.
reverting back to this one anyways.
Yeah, they may like the way it looks better, but it is a functional element. It does change the way things behave within the command. So my
Right.
recommendation is like it might not look as pretty, but I would go with these the way that she has it displayed right here. Um, that would be my recommendation. It just things behave nicer, and
Thank
you
you.
can do things that are intuitive, like iterate over a bash array, for instance.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to touch on like a important point, like sometimes in the command section, even if you're using this like smaller than greater than sign, like it might not behave the same way as bash. So like even if you write some certain commands in there and you think it's going to behave the same, it might like crash and you have to write it like in a different way. So that's just like a, little warning, I guess, when you're writing the command, make sure you're checking everything you're doing and make sure that it's doing what you want it to do, because it might not be doing it.
Okay, thank you.
And that's
And I'll just
probably
put
a difference between like the Docker you're using and your local shell, right? Like whatever you're running. I think I'm running Z shell instead of bash in my terminal, and so that behaves a little bit differently in like if statements and things like this. Um, so you can always open the Docker and play with it, and that should get you closer to where you need to be.
okay, thank you. And I'm gonna put the link in the chat here for reference. Let's see.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
It says preferred style, but yeah, I
Yeah,
get it.
yeah. I actually didn't know about this, the smaller than less than sign, so thanks, Jess, for that. That's definitely important to keep in mind. I see that so this is the error for the bigger file. You will get an error that you don't have space on your device. And that's because it's a big file. It's like 18 gigabytes, and the default disk space you get, I think, is 10. So you would probably need to increase the disk space you get for that, or you specify for that VM, as we kind of like talked about a little bit before. But you can look at the documentation to kind of do that. The documentation here. I think it's linked in the chat, but we can go ahead and link it again as well. So you need to give it a bigger machine. Awesome. Does anyone else have questions? All right, so we have 2 minutes left. I want to thank you all for taking your time and listening to us. If you have time, please fill out the survey. It's just at the end. Thanks, Anton. And we'll just stick around for a little bit more if anyone has questions, but you're free to go if you want to. We got the same error after the double quotes. Chris, do you want to do you mind sharing your screen?
Yeah, I can share my screen real quick. It's 10:03. So this is so this is the second run that I did here with just the BAM2.
Yeah, not
Uh,
fail though, because your machine is smaller, so you now have to give it a bigger machine.
oh,
So,
I thought the BAM2 was a small one.
oh, sorry, is it? Okay, never mind.
Yeah,
All right,
and
never
I
mind.
updated the code, the script to include the disk. But this is the error.
This is looking like the double quotations versus single for the Docker path. Can we look at your script?
Yeah, if we go back.
Go down a little bit, just to your Docker path. Okay, that's looking fine. Maybe, um, wait, there might be. Mm, I
It
think,
does the localization test fine.
yeah. Can I look at the log?
Yes, so if you go back up.
Okay, so it's not even provisioning the machine, so
Oh,
it seems like there's an error in the runtime. like it's starting to, I mean, it's starting to like provision the machine, but it then fails from the Docker path or whatever. So it seems like in the runtime there's something set incorrectly. Um, so my bad. It is provisioning machine, but like, okay, let's go back and see the whittle. Okay,
I think I accidentally closed the Terra
that's
workspace. So I'll just quickly go back in.
okay.
So I could let's go here.
Yeah. Go to your source. Let's edit it. Okay, so if you go to your runtime section below, um, okay, so your memory is 10. Let me see if like the syntax is correct.